as someone who wanted to birth outside of the medical system, does not really use doctors, all these things. I was like, sir, you have no idea what it means that I'm here asking for help. Like, I know
Yeah.
something's wrong. I need you to listen to me. He was like, we have a CT on site. We're just going to do a full body CT. So we did that. And pretty quickly after, the doctor comes, like, all but running in and is like, you have an abscess in your hip. You need to be in the hospital.
Welcome to the Breastfeeding Diaries, Episode 3. I'm your host, Haley Lawrence, and today we're joined by my friend, Shera Evans. We were in the same department in college, and little did we know that we would both share a love of all things crunchy, health, natural birth, and motherhood. Shera's breastfeeding journey took a turn when she had to be hospitalized with a severe infection. No one would have blamed her if she had given up, especially when she was severely ill and having to pump and dump in the hospital. But she didn't give up. So today, let's hear from Shera.
So I'm Shera, and I am an attorney by training, but right now, thankfully, I'm fortunate enough to primarily stay home. So I stay home with my one little one, Eleanor. She's 15 months. Yeah, right at 15 months. And I do still have my hat in the ring on legal things. I do contract work for the company that I used to work for. So all things in-house. Yeah.
So, I guess walk me to your pregnancy, birth experience, like what you did to prepare for birth, what was your plan, and did it go according to your plan?
Yeah, so this is something I could talk way too long about. I'll be as brief as possible. Feel free to
That's
cut me
okay.
off at any time. We knew we wanted to have kids, and I would describe us as like generally healthy people, but we really, again, like a year or more in advance, started taking, our diet and activity and sleep a lot more seriously. And at that point, I would say, is when I decided, or we decided, I should say, thankfully, my husband and I were on the same page, which, again, very thankful for that,
Yeah.
that we wanted to do a home birth or plan for a home birth. And so, obviously, with that comes a lot more, not a lot more, but definitely carries responsibility in terms of my preparation and how I'm going to approach things versus outsourcing a little bit more.
Right.
And so I I did a handful of supplements while I was pregnant. So I did like the beef liver train. So I was all that. So I did like
Yeah.
beef liver and cod liver oil, all that good stuff, which again, I know
Nice.
is not for everyone, but this time around it worked really well. And there was definitely a little kink in the road because before we found out I was expecting, we had already made plans to move states and give a new
Mm.
state a trial run. And so then I found myself moving states and moving away from everyone 6 weeks pregnant.
Oh
Don't
gosh.
recommend.
Yeah.
And so I was like, not only do I not have a home, but like I don't know anyone because we moved into a long term Airbnb. And
Wow.
so thus began like a total crisis, whatever, but total God thing. Like truly, truly, truly. Oklahoma, that's where I live now, has been an adjustment in a lot of ways. But like the biggest blessing, aside from being closer to some family, is I found an awesome midwife and we found a house. And so, anyways, moved again into a house 18 weeks pregnant. Don't recommend. And so maybe around 10 weeks or so, I was honestly sort of trying to decide, well, I already went to the OB. Do I just go that route?
Right.
Or do I stick it out and find a midwife? And again, total God thing. I had started going to a chiropractor here. Again, another crunchy thing I did through
Yeah.
pregnancy that I swear by. I don't know how, I know people can do it. I know women are incredible and can do it without, but I hope
Yeah.
to never have to go without a
Yeah.
chiropractor. She actually suggested the midwife that we ultimately went with. And so I started seeing her, I guess like 12, 13 weeks was the first appointment. And I'm trying to think of like during my pregnancy of any crazy, I mean, I did a lot of funny things, I'm sure,
And was
but
she like licensed as a lactation consultant as well? Or maybe not full licensing, but I think midwives are usually like partially licensed to help in the first
yes,
6 weeks.
great question. Yes, so she is, and then so Our birth team consisted of our midwife, a midwife assistant, and a doula. We did go for a
Okay.
doula. And so our midwife and doula both had, I think, like the lactation consultant, like the LC
Hmm.
letters behind their names. And like all three women, just super knowledgeable about
Yeah.
birth and breastfeeding. All between the three of them, they have 14 kids. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So leading up to the birth, did you prepare any pumping items? Like, were you planning to go back to work or something like that? Or was it just exclusive nursing?
I definitely expected and planned and hoped to breastfeed. And I just had a birth team that was aligned in expecting, hoping, planning to breastfeed. And I think all of that together was really helpful. But yeah, that was where I was at going into it, honestly, pretty blind.
Yeah. Okay. So when did contractions start? How'd the birth go?
So I started having contractions on my due date, which, as you have experienced,
Yes.
who knows? And so I was
That's
like, oh my
amazing.
goodness, wow, cool. Joke was on me in my case. So I had like 4 days of early but like very active labor. And by that point, we were like, okay, like, is everything good? Whatever. So we did a check in with my midwife. Thankfully, all was well. And so at that point, and so I had planned, again, things never go as planned. I had planned to have very, very hands off everything.
Yeah.
I'm going for it. It's a breastfeeding birth podcast, so I'm going for it. I'm gonna use
Yes.
okay.
Jump in. I want to hear it all.
And so it was like 4 days of pretty intense, whatever. And went in and I was like, you know what? I want to be checked. And so on one hand, it was kind of discouraging. On the other hand, it was encouraging in that at that point I was like 3-4 centimeters and pretty effaced. And she was super, super low. And so my midwife was like, oh, baby's gonna fall right out. Of course, she did not, but yeah, I know. I was like, maybe you were
Okay,
trying to
so
be
when you say
encouraging.
it felt like active, was it just like nonstop contractions all day, all night, or was there
It,
breaks?
yeah, there were breaks. So during the day, they were maybe every 15 minutes.
Okay,
And then at night, things would ramp up.
right.
And of course, looking back now with hindsight, I can tell the last like 30 hours of my birth situation, which there's the spoiler alert, was way more intense than everything else, especially
Yeah.
the last like 5. But it was definitely there were breaks in between them, but it was consistent at that point. And so that's why, like I said, we went to the midwife and checked me, checked on baby, checked if there was like a cord issue. There wasn't, thankfully.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of people, probably not in your audience, but a lot of people hear home birth and think you're just like going
Yeah.
for it with nothing. It's like, no, that is not the case at all.
Yeah.
And so she checked me and did a very gentle sweep, which I know it was gentle because it didn't hurt. So that was great. And so we went home expecting things to pick up and, start happening. And they did pick up. And so that would have been January 8th. And so then fast forward by the evening of January 9th, contractions were like 3-4 minutes apart, definitely more intense than they had been, all good things. So we called our birth team over and our doula came first. And so she's, doing all the things, making me sit on the toilet, all that good stuff. And our midwife and midwife assistant show up. And I was like, I want to be checked. I want to be checked. Which again, if you had told me that beforehand, never would have believed you.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh my gosh, you're 7 centimeters. It's almost go time. I was like,
Right.
sweet, here we go. And we like texted our family, which I think was a mistake in my case. Like we got all excited. And then I totally stalled for a long time. I ended up being like stalled at 7 for like 24 hours.
Oh
So
gosh.
I stalled the night of January 9th, and my midwife, this was like several hours after all of that, and I could tell things were fizzling out, and I was like so defeated at that point. Our midwife was like, I have to go catch another baby. But God bless our midwife assistant and our doula. they stayed. They hung out in our living room, like literally until 3 or 4 a.m. And I would just try to doze, roll over, have a contraction, doze, have a contraction like every 3 minutes. And then around like 3 or 4 a.m., they came in and they're like, what are we thinking? Do we want to, like at that point, it was like, do we want to go transfer? Do you want XYZ? Which I can understand in that moment why a lot of women would choose that avenue. Or do you want to like try to rest and we'll come back in a few hours? And I was like, and so they gave me and Elijah, my husband, time to talk. They're like, let's try to rest. Let's see, like, let's reset in the morning. So, by the grace of God, like, there's no other explanation. I crashed totally asleep for like 2, 3 hours. Like,
Wow.
I don't know if I moved a muscle and woke up. And at that point, our midwife was like, all right, we kind of got to get the show on the road. What are our options here? And so, funny enough, she was like, why don't you do a few cycles of pumping? I was like, oh, yeah, that's
Ah,
a great idea.
yes.
I had no idea what I was doing. So
Yep.
I literally like 911 texted my good friend who she has a daughter 4 months older than mine. And I was like, you mentioned we have the same pump. Can you tell me how to use
Yeah.
it?
How to turn it on, how to set it
Yeah,
up.
like I
Yeah.
literally had done nothing. And
Yeah.
like thankfully I had at least like on the right size flange and everything, but like
Yeah.
literally I don't think I had turned it on. So I bounced on my big yoga ball, watched Suits all day, did some pumping cycles. I did do a half pour, as I like to call it, of a midwife's brew, which I know can be a controversial thing. And so that was around like 1 p.m., I think. And then everything happened fairly quickly compared to everything else. It happened quickly for me around maybe 5:30. Things really ramped up. And then our doula came around like 6:37 and was just helping with counter pressure, all that good stuff, which again, like it was so nice to just labor at home. I was just like, moving around, doing all the things. And then our midwife and midwife assistant showed up around like 7:38. And I kept asking my midwife, I was like, please check me, please check. She was like, Shera, you do not need to be checked. Do you want to get in the tub? So, yeah, I think so. I think so. And so again, that was at like 8 o'clock maybe. I went and looked at pictures because I was like, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. And then got in the birth pool, which I had always heard women talk about how much of a relief that was. And I didn't really believe it could be as amazing as it was. I was like instantly relieved so much.
Mm,
And then
so
she
good.
was born just before 9 p.m.
In the water?
In the water. And so
Yeah.
that's actually really cool. I love to share this. She was actually born in call. And
Oh,
so
wow.
even that like was such a cool experience and it was funny. But yeah, so she was born. And then when our midwife realized, she was like, wait, everyone take a pause. And it was such this like amazing, like honestly sacred moment
Yeah. You're
where we're
getting to
just
see
there.
like in the sack,
Yeah.
all like just like in the womb. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I love
was
those.
crazy. And our doula, she's like, oh my gosh, this was on my list for 2024. And it was January 10th. So that was also like comedic relief. I was like, here you go.
Yep.
And so, yeah, she was born in the water. And then we just hung out. Again, I've only had one and it's only been at home, but it was the most amazing thing. We just hung out as a family of three while they cleaned up everything. And then she latched pretty much immediately. She came out very alert. By the time I actually had her, she was almost 41 weeks. So I do think that also played a role.
She was
She,
ready.
yeah, she came out. She was like, I'm ready to go. I'm here. And so that was honestly kind of a challenge. She was super alert and awake. But yeah, I just fed on demand for the first several weeks. I will say she was very kind to us in that she slept pretty much right off the bat, would sleep like 3 hour chunks. Our midwife was like, this is the baby that tricks you into having a lot of babies. I was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
yeah, I
Good
can see
baby.
that.
Good baby. Everything seems like it's good. What happens next?
Yeah. So I had a very fortunate problem. I know the grass was always greener of definitely erring on the side of an oversupply, which turned out to be a huge blessing in disguise for the biggest challenge of my breastfeeding journey. But before that happened, definitely battled. I was going toward mastitis, but was super
Mm.
fortunate to nip that.
So everything's going good except for the mastitis. You're nursing, she's growing, things seem to be
Yeah.
going good, right?
Yeah. We were good. We were healthy. She was growing. And then, like, her 2 month appointment, I will say, she was almost 8 pounds when she was born. She was 7'11".
Oh,
And so
wow.
she was very long and like 60th percentile in weight. And at her 2 month appointment, she had dropped to like the 6th percentile for weight.
Mm.
I was a very long, skinny baby.
Yeah.
So we didn't think anything of it because, and again, even because we do have a pediatrician who's awesome, and so again, weren't concerned, didn't think anything of it. Meanwhile, I had started feeling bad around like 7 8 weeks postpartum, like 7 weeks postpartum, just kind of like a general flu like sort of, I don't know what. And I guess I'll just sort of dive into
Yeah.
all of that.
It's time. It's
Yeah, I
time.
know. This is definitely because, yeah, I semi joke like God made our breastfeeding journey so smooth because otherwise I don't think I would have continued on, to be honest. If this had popped up and we had already been struggling and like having hiccups and whatnot. So around 7 weeks postpartum, I started feeling kind of just bad again. Like I had a low grade fever, but didn't have like a runny nose or anything. And so I don't know, just kind of went about life, right? Again, especially new mom, it's like, well, whatever, I'm tired and run
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
And so life just goes on. And so maybe around, it would have been around 10 weeks postpartum. At that point, I had been having some, and I had a really, again, it's probably obnoxious to some people listening, a really smooth labor. Like I didn't tear, I didn't have anything, nothing. And so, like, zero complications, barely bled, the whole shebang, which again, great, great for you. Like, some people are like rolling their eyes. But that is to say, like, I had no red flags. And so I resumed activity, working out, other activity, all that around the 6 week mark. Again, no reason for concern. But I had what felt like a pulled hip flexor while all of this was going on. I never put two and two together. I figured again, I got too ambitious getting into working out again. I love to work out, pulled my
Mhm.
hip flexor. And so around 10 weeks postpartum, at that point, I had had like 103-degree fever for several weeks. So we went to like an urgent care, and the doctor, they did a like flu test, strep test, whatever. I came back positive for the flu. And so you could tell he was kind of like, lady, you have the flu, go home, like
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
so he was like, here's some prescription cough pills that you can't take if you're going to breastfeed. I was like, okay, awesome. Thanks, so
Thanks.
helpful. So I went home and still like my cough eventually went away. So I did test positive for the flu. And so went home and I was like, okay, I have the flu. Again, I'm run down, I've been tired, yada yada. And then another week goes by and I don't have the cough anymore. I don't feel bad like the flu, but I still have like 103 fever. And this is with, at this point, like I'm taking Motrin around the clock and I still have
Oh
this horrible
gosh.
fever. And I literally, I mean, for the past, at that point, the past like 3 weeks, I literally just laid in bed and I would nurse her and Elijah would take her, which like God bless him, because that was a whole different thing. Because like he was technically back at work and
Oh
just
gosh.
anyways. And so another week goes by, we go back to urgent care. And thankfully, and again, I'm breastfeeding, so Elijah and Eleanor come with. So
Hmm.
I'm like, it's a group effort at this point.
Yeah.
Again, should have brought my pump. You'd think I would have caught on to this by now. But thankfully, that doctor was like, something's not right. I'm just going to run all the blood tests I can. And so they did that. And he came back and was like, your blood test shows there's a bacterial infection. We just don't know where. And he was like, do you have any idea where? I was like, no. Again, not putting two and two together of hip flexor pain,
Hmm.
or what I thought was hip flexor pain. And so at this urgent care, and again, this is as someone who wanted to birth outside of the medical system, does not really use doctors, all these things. I was like, sir, you have no idea what it means that I'm here asking for help. Like, I know
Yeah.
something's wrong. I need you to listen to me. And so, again, this urgent care, even that, such a blessing. He was like, we have a CT on site. We're just going to do a full body CT. And so we did that. And pretty quickly after, the doctor comes, like, all but running in and is like, you have an abscess in your hip. You need to be in the hospital. Pretty immediately, someone came in and started IV antibiotics, like the three strongest IV antibiotics that exist.
Yeah.
And like we were just starting those while we waited for a hospital room. And again, even that silver lining, the doctor who was dealing with us at this urgent care was like, I have privileges at this hospital on the like south side of the city. We lived on the north side. And so we're like, is there any chance we can get into this hospital that was like less than 10 minutes from our house? And he was like, I'll call, but you know they're the best in OKC, odds are no, blah, blah, blah. Well, thankfully, a few hours go by, they have a room. And so, which again, especially for all things breastfeeding and pumping, was a huge blessing in the long run. And so
Being
I
close to your
finished,
house, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
being close to our house. And so I finished the IV antibiotics at this urgent care. And so we use a health share program. I don't know if you're familiar.
Okay. So no
And so like
insurance.
we
Yeah.
don't have insurance. And so he was like, I am legally supposed to make you take an ambulance because of like how severe you are, but I know you don't have insurance. So if you promise me not to drive home and just go straight to the hospital, I'll let you go. And I was like, I promise, I promise, I
Wow.
promise.
That's crazy.
And so we drove straight to the hospital. We did. Again, I'm an attorney. I'm not gonna, I'm trying to be good, but get to the hospital, get checked in. And so I was immediately started on the three same super strong IV antibiotics. And I was put on like the list to do a surgery to remove the abscess. And so this, again, total blur. Meanwhile, this whole time I've been nursing her. And Elijah and her are with me. My mom drove up from Dallas Fort Worth, and Elijah's dad flew in to help him with Eleanor at our house. And again, parts of this are honestly a blur for me, but they went home that night. I had maybe half a dozen bags of milk in the freezer, like not much. Didn't think I was going to need a freezer stash, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, I assumed I was going to be home with her
Yeah. And
24/7.
when you're dealing with the mastitis thing, you don't want to pump or haka or things that are going to,
Exactly.
make that worse. So that's not a bad thing to not have a stash early
Yeah.
on. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Cause like anytime I tried the Haka, things got, again, because I definitely erred on the side of oversupply, things got out of control and it was not working. And
right.
again, to your point, this was a couple months postpartum. Like it
Yeah. So
was
you didn't
early
think you
days.
needed one. Yeah.
Yeah. And
You,
so,
so you send him home. Hey, there's a few bags of milk in the freezer.
yeah. Yeah. I sent him home and like, again, God's grace, she had never taken a bottle. Like I had never given her a bottle. And
Yeah.
so praise the Lord, she took a bottle because I don't
Wow.
know. I don't know. And so the first couple days in the hospital, those were in one way probably the hardest because I couldn't, once those were going through my system, I couldn't give her that milk because they were the strongest antibiotics. They didn't know what was going on. And so they were just like pumping full. I literally was getting like a new round every hour, which again, if you had told me I'd ever be
Yeah.
doing something like that, I'd never ever believe you. And so he had a few bags. Again, thankfully, she took a bottle. I did a Target pickup order for the Serenity Kids formula, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I guess we're probably going to need that. Like, I don't know. And so that was a couple days. And then the best gift I've ever been given, the same friend who I texted while I was in labor about how to use a
Yeah.
pump, she drove up to see me in the hospital. And again, she has a daughter who's 4 months older. And she brought me this huge bag of milk that she
Oh,
had
good.
because she had already gone back to work and was doing the whole pumping thing,
Yeah.
all of that. And yeah, like truly the best gift. If you've ever been on the receiving side of getting someone's breast milk, or even if you've been a breastfeeding mom, like, the gift that is.
Yeah. And I
I
think
like,
there's like formula has a place, but I do think that when you do start with milk, donor milk first in a supply issue, that ends up working out. There's something that keeps the supply going when you have donor milk involved versus like when people start formula, it just for some reason like the production just slows down.
yeah,
And so, and I think when it is donor milk instead, even though it's still not your milk, for some reason, I feel like our bodies just know like, oh, we still need to make milk. Um,
absolutely.
so I think that's one of the reasons why I see so much value in donor milk too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
aside
I
from the fact that
fully
it's
agree.
amazingly breast milk is so amazingly
Yeah.
formulated. So,
No, I fully agree. And like you said, like we could go a million different ways of like, right. I fully agree in that your body, your hormones just know. And like,
mhm.
it's almost like, and again, there is a time and place for formula. I'm not knocking formula, but like, that's so different than getting milk from someone like in your village, even if that village is, a stranger on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's just different for sure. And so, best gift ever. And meanwhile, in the hospital, I should say, I had been pumping every 3, 4 hours
Hmm.
and I was getting next to nothing.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard for me as a mom because I had instant guilt of her being so skinny.
Did your fever go away as we started these antibiotics, or was it still like I'm just wondering what level of stress your body was still under, even though the
So the
antibiotics, because they didn't know
Yeah.
if it was
So
going to
the
work.
first couple days in the hospital, I still felt pretty terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad I felt until I started feeling better. But the first couple days in the hospital, they had me on Tylenol, Motrin, and the IV antibiotics, and I still felt like crap. Those first couple days, I was on schedule to get a procedure done to remove the abscess or to drain the abscess, but
Okay.
that had not occurred yet. Because downside, the weird thing about a hospital is my surgery kept getting bumped. And so on the downside, I still felt like crap. On the plus side, that meant I was far from the sickest person in the hospital. And so like
Yeah.
perspective, I guess. But it's like, okay,
Yeah. It's like,
I
I
guess I'll
guess,
just sit here rotting away. Like,
oh, man.
okay, hope this doesn't burst. Anyways, again, I
So
am
Elijah's
obviously,
taking Eleanor home at night, but
yeah,
bringing her up during the day for some cuddles, or are you just kind of letting him figure out a schedule of when he can make it
yeah.
up?
Good question. So at this point, he was like fully off of work and just like all in on all of the logistics of this. And so he would come up, he would give her a bottle of milk first thing in the morning. And then they would come up like after that. And we would, like you said, I would literally just like hold her in the bed and just hang out, whatever. And meanwhile, I was just pumping and dumping. And then he would bring her up as often as he could during her, at the time, like wake windows, which was usually a couple times a day.
Okay.
And then that was pre abscess removal, I
Yeah.
guess. And so then I did the procedure to get a drain put in. So they put a little drain in the abscess that was in
Right.
my hip. And for that, I had narcotics I had like fentanyl and everything for
Yeah.
the procedure. So I had to pump and dump that. And then had to wait. It was like another day of waiting to see what the bacteria was. So still pumping and dumping. But on the plus side, I almost instantly felt better once the drain was placed.
Mm.
This is not the topic of the podcast, so I'll spare the details, but you could like see the stuff coming out. It was disgusting. I instantly felt so much better. Like my fever pretty
Yeah.
much instantly broke once things were gone, all that. So that was huge. And when I went into the hospital, my blood work was horrible and my kidneys and liver had started failing. And so that was like, I was going septic was the gist. And so thankfully
And
already throughout.
were they thinking this had probably started about when the fever started? So you'd been almost a month. I'm counting
Yeah.
the weeks here, like 4 weeks of
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
your body really was fine. And it does kind of seem like your body was doing what it was supposed to do and that you were pretty healthy, because it seems like if someone wasn't very healthy, that they would have crashed out a lot earlier than 4 weeks in.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was not the best thing that it didn't reveal itself because
No,
you
for
were,
sure.
and like you said, you're postpartum. So you're thinking, I'm just tired,
Oh,
just feeling
absolutely.
gross because it's just a
Yeah.
hard season anyway.
Exactly. Like in the first couple weeks, oddly enough, Elijah went on like a little work trip and he was kind of like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'm just a little run down. It'll be good for me to like get a couple days, just me and her, just, resting, whatever." Yeah, had no clue. And yes, even the doctor who was in charge of my case, the infectious disease, she was like, "There's no way you would have come back from this had you not been so healthy." And so, like, I think I have had doubts about it because I'm like, I believe all these things, I do all these things, and then this happens to me, which,
Mm.
right, especially as believers, we know that's not how it works. Like, I know that in my logical brain,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like, I have definitely had those thoughts and moments for sure. And so, I will say, in terms of like being able to survive, and obviously my milk was such in a terrible spot, but nonetheless, I still kept her alive. Like
Yeah.
again, the female body is incredible.
Yeah. And I think she would have, if things were bad as far as milk goes, weight gain is one thing, but if she really wasn't getting enough, she would have told you. Like
Yeah.
I think especially being alert, I think she would have hollered at you and let you
Yeah.
know that
That's
something. So
that's very true.
so I don't think, I mean, it's different when a baby's like lethargic and
Yeah.
they cannot tell you that there's a milk issue, but pretty sure she would have told you.
Yeah, no. She was still alert and feisty as ever. So that is a good point.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't know. There's just so much that I'm just so thankful for how it worked out. And so, like, even once, pretty much immediately, once the abscess got drained, I made like a total 180, which, again, I think a lot of that, one, obviously God, but also to your point, like the foundations that I had laid, and obnoxious as it was still doing in the hospital. Like, I had my little supplement thing in the hospital, which I'm
Yeah.
sure they all were like, this chick, like, whatever.
Yeah.
And again, no, I didn't think that my vitamins were gonna
And they make
save
you
me,
scan it
but
in, right? They made me
yeah,
like send all my supplements to pharmacy to review my
yes,
supplements.
yes. I'm like, I promise, I promise. I got some beef liver and some B vitamins and magnesium. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah. It was just, again, as someone who had never dealt with a hospital stay, it was so eye opening and humbling. And so yeah, about 24 hours after I had this procedure to drain it, and I still had the drain in. So I had the drain in for like another month. That was a whole different ordeal. Yeah, don't recommend. They figured out it was strep A. To
Okay.
this day, no one
Wow.
knows. Like, to this day, the infectious disease doctor, like, she was like, "Oh, you're going to be a study." I was like, "Lovely, just what I wanted to hear." Because they don't know. They don't
They
know.
don't know how this strep A bacteria got in your hip, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like something inflamed my hip, but how and what and how strep A got there, there's no earthly idea. But that was good news in terms of what bacteria it could have been, because obviously that's not, you don't want that, but that's not the most serious. Like, it wasn't like a
Mm,
super aggressive staph or something.
right.
And so, all things considered, that was good news. And the best news was there was an antibiotic that was what they call compatible with breastfeeding, which
Okay.
you don't love to be on an antibiotic
Yeah.
intravenous, especially. But again, given my options. And so at that point, I really did, though. I wrestled with, is this where I call it quits? Like, is
Yeah.
this where would she be better off with formula or donor milk if I could find it? Or did the pros of me breastfeeding her both knowing her and my body responding to what she needs and just like
Mhm.
emotionally, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Do the pros outweigh the cons? And
Yeah.
that's where I fell with it. And again, zero shame, judgment, anything to someone who would do it differently. Like it was
Yeah.
not a fun place to be.
And I don't know as much about that, but my understanding would be that the antibiotics would kill your gut bacteria. And then, but you're still making milk. It would just not necessarily have as many of the good bacteria that you could give her, but it still has all of the other features of milk. That would
Exactly.
be
That
my
not
understanding. Because there's lots of
yeah,
other toxins, I think, just for, I guess, the audience, there's lots of stuff that we consume that does maybe like get filtered out by our bodies. And then also I think fat stores like the most toxins. So, but I think as far as the antibiotic
yeah,
goes, it's killing your bacteria
exactly.
and you're providing bacteria through the milk that's going to populate her gut. So
Yeah. No, for sure.
you kind of
Helpful
had to weigh the
context.
options there.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm with you, like, right, we live in a fallen world with all sorts of things. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we can have another round.
I'm always up for it. And so at that point, I was super thankful. I felt better, all the things. I was still in the hospital, but that meant I was still going to feed her. And so, like, pressure was sort of on in some ways. And so, because again, I had been pumping, but I'd been kind of lazy pumping, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest, right? Like, because I
Yeah.
knew I was literally going to shuffle over to my little bathroom in my hospital room and dump the milk. Like, it's just so
Mm,
depressing.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
But now
so,
you get to feed it to her. So you're
yes. And
pumping
exactly. And
away.
so, I was just pumping away in my little hospital bed. And what was crazy was, I kid you not, like again, 24 hours after I had the abscess drained, my supply went up like crazy. And again, everyone's supply is going to be different, like that and all those things. But like for me, it was clear where I was at was not my norm.
Hmm.
And yeah, so my supply like instantly went way back up and I pumped. And at that point, it was super awesome because God bless Elijah, he would still give her a bottle like first thing in the morning. She's an early riser. Maybe not so much now, but back then, very early riser. Would give her a bottle like first thing in the morning and then her last bottle before bed. But all the other times, he would come and bring her to the hospital, and I would nurse her in the hospital. And then at that point, she was still eating through the night. And so I would pump through the night twice.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was. And then I was in the hospital for a week and I went home with a line and the drain in my hip. And so I
Wow.
had IV antibiotics at home for 3.5 more weeks. It was a month total
Wow.
once we figured out the proper ones, and same with the drain. So that was a whole different logistics. Like even like the side of the bed I was on with all of my drain and IV, like our bed at home, like it wouldn't work now with the side
Yeah.
that I was on with her bassinet and whatever. And like admittedly I would co-sleep some with her, like all that. And so it was like a total reshuffle of our lives. And yeah,
Was your lowest moment during that point in the hospital, or was at this point, are we seeing like a light in the tunnel and we're just glad to be alive?
good
What are
question.
all
I
the
think
feelings?
I thought I had my lowest moment in the hospital, but again, I think I was so wrapped up in feeling bad that everything didn't really sink in yet. But there was one moment in the hospital. So, do you know the owlet sock?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I made Elijah put an owlet sock on her while I was in the hospital
Yeah.
because I literally, because I didn't sleep in the hospital. You have someone coming in every
Yeah.
hour, like
Yeah.
all the things. I literally would just stare at my phone watching the little
Aw.
outlet app, like crying. So that was a low moment. But honestly, the hardest moment was it was not the first night I got home, but maybe the second or third night I was home. And I just like hit rock bottom of being so frustrated. Like, I think I felt better enough that I wanted to do things and I still
Mm,
couldn't. Like I still had this big line in my arm and like had to do all of that to myself every day. I had this drain that kept getting caught on things and was super painful and like all this stuff.
mm,
And all I want to do was just like it was late at night, of course. That's when all
yeah.
the emotions are high. And I just wanted to hold her and I couldn't hold her right because of the line, yada yada. And so that was a low point. That was probably the lowest point, honestly. And yeah, the month or 3.5 weeks that I was home was really hard because I felt better, but I still had all of these contraction and like my blood work, again, total God thing. And also I think just the foundations of my health. And doctors would say the same thing. They're like, this is crazy that your blood work is already back to like perfectly normal a week and a half after, to your point, like a month of slowly but surely dying. Um,
Wow.
like, um, it was hard because I felt good, but I still couldn't like be the mom that I wanted to be. And so that was really hard. And again, like honestly, just the toll of like I was so thankful to be able to breastfeed her again, but like I could only hold her in one arm. And so the logistics, just the logistics of it that I took so for granted before all of this, that was really hard.
Yeah. So, what were your, I think you had mentioned this to me. You saw a change in her as far as like weight gain,
Yeah.
and that you also did a little few extra little things like electrolytes, things like that. So, tell me about that, just the recovery, and then when you started to see that difference.
Yeah. So in terms of my recovery, so the doctor in charge of my case, because it was such an odd one, fun, always what you want to hear, she was honest. I don't want to say she was holistic, but she had some more holistic ideas. And so she really encouraged like us my diet, like lots of probiotic, prebiotic things. And so I literally every day I was just like eating as much food in general, but because I had also lost a lot of weight through all of that, which again, we need some fat stores for good breast milk. And but I was literally just eating as much like sauerkraut, kombucha, yogurt, like all these things, like literally as much as I could handle every day. And so, and yeah, this whole time again, I was doing all of my supplements. I was doing beef gelatin. I was taking collagen. I was doing tons of electrolytes, like maybe two or three servings, just like tons of minerals, all that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to think what appointment it was. All that to say, maybe within a month of me being healthy and at home, she started climbing the charts on her weight, which again, babies come in all different shapes and sizes. We assumed she just was taking after me as a baby, but clearly that was not the case. She's now a very hefty 98th percentile.
Wow.
And so, like, even that, again, I know it can be such a like trigger for some people.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's zero, because I also feel like you always hear about 99th percentile babies. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if everyone's the 99th percentile baby, I don't think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Where's everything, all the percentages in between?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I want to say at that follow up visit, she was back at like her next visit, she was at like 60th percentile. And then since then, she has been in the 90s, which yeah, she's a chunky thing even to this day, which I never get so to have a chunky baby and I love it. But yeah, it was again, I've wrestled with a lot of mom guilt, but to your point, that's a very good point. She would have let me know if she was truly like, needed more.
Mhm.
But she was definitely not thriving like she, I think, thankfully was afterward.
Yeah. Wow. And did you tell your midwife, like, did they think there was any connection to the birth that this infection happened?
So I did tell her, or Elijah is who told her when I got admitted to the hospital. Her best guess is because she was so low for so long, because she was at like a +2 station for like a week, that maybe that, like at the very root, maybe that irritated those muscles. And then further irritation when I did start working out and resuming sexual activity and all of that That
Mm,
was just like the final thing. But yeah, that's what's I think been hard to wrestle with, especially thinking of we'd love to have more kids one day,
yeah.
of no one has a reason of why this happened. And I'm sure you
Yeah.
can kind of relate. Like no one
I've
has
been
a
there.
reason of why this happened. And so it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, is that going to happen again? God
Yep.
forbid. So just wrestling with that because yeah, everyone's best guess is just some sort of activity. And I just maybe because yeah, I don't know, because the doctor was blaming the flu, and I was like, yeah, but I felt really bad for 3 weeks before the flu. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What were the voices or supports that kind of kept you going? Like family, social
Mm,
media voices. What
yeah,
what were
great.
the ones kind of encouraging you?
No, that's a great question. Definitely my family. Elijah, my husband, I think he was always super encouraging and supportive. And if he hadn't been, right, if he, and again, this is, I'm not, I don't know, if he hadn't been as encouraging and like bringing Eleanor up all the time, I would like to think that I would have still pumped, but even that, right, it just has so much more logistics. But he was a huge support. My mom she stayed at the hospital with me the entire week I was there. And so every time I pumped, she would go and wash my pump parts, which like again, just like I don't know, things like
Because
that.
that's the worst part of pumping, everyone knows.
Totally,
So if you can
totally.
get
Yeah.
someone else to do that, that's
Yes.
very helpful.
Yes. Like she literally, after every time, morning or night, would go and wash all the pump parts. And I'll be honest, I will say, and this might be an unpopular thing, but like social media was honestly an encouragement because I follow so many accounts that are so like breastfeeding and pumping like positive, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. Like that was encouraging because like again, I was in a really hard situation. There are women all over the world. That's not to negate my situation, but like there are women all over the world doing this, and it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard. Even in the best circumstances, it's hard. And there are women in really terrible, challenging circumstances that still get it done. And that was encouraging to me. Yeah.
And throughout that time in the hospital, as you're pumping and your milk's starting to come back, are you thinking, oh, I'm going to make it to 12 months? Or can I just make it to the next month? Or can I just make it to 6 months?
Yeah. At that point, 6 months was my goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6 months was my goal. And because I kind of went into breastfeeding before all of this, not really, honestly, 6 months is what I would have said. And so once all of this happened, my goal was 6 months, which thankfully we met. And no plans to stop at this point. I love it, like even more than I expected to. To your point, I hoped for 6 months. And then I think, like a lot of women who do keep going, I was like, okay, well, we'll make it to 9 months and then 12 months. And then I'm like, well, we both love it. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Because, again, at least in her case, she loves food, which I know is a blessing. And so she's not like really reliant on it, but it's just a really easy, natural, fun thing at this point.
Yeah. And so going back to being in the hospital, what, you'd mentioned your feelings towards God. There was a little bit of like, okay, but you were trusting him the whole time, I guess. Or were
Yeah.
you? Like what was the turning point there? Or did you kind of just stay steady the whole time as far as
I did
relying on God?
not stay steady the whole time. That is for sure. While I was sick, before I was in the hospital, I wrestled a lot because, and even in the hospital, again, I think it was a great lesson for me because it was very humbling in that, right, you can do all the things right. You can do all the quote unquote things right. You can do XYZ and you still just never know, especially when it comes to birth and breastfeeding. And so I think that was a lesson I clearly definitely needed to learn. And again, that's easier said than done on this side of things because while I was in the thick of it in the hospital, I definitely struggled with, especially before they knew what it was. I was like, okay, well, if this bursts and I die, like I'm going to be really ticked off. I think I'm going to be really sad and really ticked off of like,
Uh, I love your
I,
personality. You're like, if I die, that's a problem. Okay, I love it.
like that's totally where I was at. And
Yeah.
again, I honestly just felt so bad that I did not have a lot of brain cells going on. But you know what's funny is the chaplain of the hospital came in, and he was this like huge African dude, super like your most stereotypical, like super friendly, whatever. But it was honestly such a good conversation because, right, he sees people from all walks of life. And I was like, oh, like I'm a believer, all this stuff. And so we really actually had a candid conversation. And he referenced a psalm. It's Psalm, I think it's 131. It talks about a weaned child
Hmm.
and like in a child at its mother's bosom. And I hope I'm not recalling the psalm incorrectly, but anyways. And so that was such a like little God wink, as what I like to call it, of I don't know, just like the way he could whip that out and say that. It was just really cool. And so that was like a huge encouragement because again, in the hospital I definitely was struggling. And I also was like angry, right? That I was stuck in this hospital and not home with my baby. And, definitely had like the why me sort of feelings that a lot of people feel.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, something I absolutely did not expect to wrestle with was like survivor's guilt. So that's been an interesting journey. Like the whole sepsis thing is so fascinating because like everyone's experience is so different. And so at the same time, I've had a lot of, yeah, survival guilt around it. And so this is funny that I should have maybe mentioned. The first time we went to urgent care was my 30th birthday. Don't recommend. And so,
You
like,
like to
once
party hard.
I guess so. That's one word for it. And so when I got home, I was like, I'm living life to the fullest. Da, 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 da. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, maybe actually I just need to enjoy being home with
Mm,
my husband and my baby. And so, I mean, that was really the biggest change in my life was I decided to stay home. I'm super fortunate that I have the ability to choose that. I wasn't fully committed to going back and I wasn't fully committed to saying goodbye to it all. And but I had planned to go back. And then the month that I was home with home health and all that stuff, I was holding Eleanor. And again, it's a hot mess at this point. I can only hold her in this arm and I can't sit in the chair with her, all the things. But I was like, I can't imagine. I can't imagine missing out. And again, I think that was a lesson that God knew I needed of like what actually matters. And again, I think maybe especially as an attorney, you can get your identity so wrapped up in other things. And so that was kind of a hard pill to swallow, but I'm so thankful for it. And again, I'm even obviously so thankful just for the ability to choose that. I'll always have that little part of me that's like, why did that have to happen to me? And how? How did that happen? Like,
yeah.
how did that happen? Which, again, is a lesson that I definitely need day in and day out of. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One more question is what would you say to a mom who is struggling with their supplier with breastfeeding or having a challenge? What's your encouragement to them?
Mm. My encouragement is assuming I'm going to make an assumption with someone listening to your podcast, it is worth the challenge. It is worth the hard work. It really is. You can do it. And like I said, I think whether it is friends, family, even social media, finding women who have walked that journey and have had, if they've had the smoothest, most uneventful experience or a super challenging experience, like using that as encouragement. And then I will say, this is a like very practical thing that helped me a lot when we were going through all this hospital stuff and whatnot. I picked a hymn, like pick a song. And so every time you like nurse, sing or hum that. Cause that was like in moments that I didn't want to keep doing it or in moments that were really hard. that was really encouraging. And like to this day, I hum slash sing that to her.
What
And
song
like
is it?
even it's great as thy faithfulness.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And so I don't know. And that's just like, I guess, even just like a new mom tip on those long nights in those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep going. Like, pick a song.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Shera, for being vulnerable with us and sharing your amazing journey. If Shera's story inspired you, I would be so honored if you would share this episode and follow us on Instagram. And of course, if you have any stories to share, please email us at breastfeedingdiaries@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.